Something happened in space that most people on Earth never heard about, and the scary part is that we were just 9 days away from being in a completely different world today. The sun had an incredibly violent outburst. It was a massive cloud of charged particles shot out from its surface at incredible speed. We call this a coronal mass ejection. This particular one, on July 23rd of that year, was not a normal one. Scientists later measured it and found it was one of the most powerful ever recorded, possibly stronger than anything we had seen in over 150 years. Now here is where things get uncomfortable. The cloud missed Earth, but only because our planet had moved past that exact spot in its orbit about 9 days earlier. These 9 days are the only reason life as we know it continued without interruption. What would have happened if it had hit? Scientists who studied the event estimated it could have fried satellites, collapsed power grids across entire continents, and knocked out GPS and internet systems worldwide. The recovery time would have likely been years, if not longer. Cosmos 95.
It's Sakai. Even more addictive than TikTok every time.
Cosmos 954. On January 24, 1978, people in northwestern Canada heard a low rumble moving across the sky. Some saw a streak of light, and a few reported feeling uneasy without knowing why. They had no idea what was passing over them, but we do now, and it's much scarier than what they could have imagined. Cosmos 954 had been launched by the Soviet Union in September of 1977. It needed a lot of power, and the solution was a small nuclear reactor on board, fueled by enriched uranium. For a while, everything worked as planned, but then the Soviets lost control of it. By the time it became clear the satellite was going to fall, there was no way to stop it. It re-entered the atmosphere and started breaking down, scattering debris across a massive stretch of Canadian wilderness, covering an area of roughly 124,000 square kilometers. That is an area larger than many countries. A joint American and Canadian operation called Operation Morning Light was launched to find and recover the wreckage. They eventually found around 12 large pieces of debris. Some of those pieces were so radioactive that being near them for too long would have been dangerous to a person's health. But there's something pretty disturbing. The recovered pieces represented only about 1% of the total satellite. The other 99% was either burned up in the atmosphere, sunk to the bottom of lakes, or was simply never found, somewhere out there in the wilderness. The Soviet Union paid Canada a settlement afterward. The mutated space fungi. In the late 1990s, the Russian Mir space station developed a problem that felt straight out of a sci-fi horror movie. Mir had been orbiting Earth since 1986, and over the years it had become home to something unexpected. Cosmonauts and researchers eventually found fungal growth behind wall panels, on equipment, on rubber seals, on cables, and even on the windows. The station, which was built from metal and glass and synthetic materials, was being slowly eaten from the inside. The incredible part was what the space environment had done to these organisms. Fungi on Earth are already remarkably tough. In space, exposed to high radiation, microgravity, and conditions nothing like what they evolved in, these organisms didn't die. They adapted. Studies found that some of the strains collected from Mir had changed in ways that made them more resilient, harder to kill, and in some cases, more aggressive toward the materials they were growing on. There were strains that showed resistance to the cleaning methods used to remove them. For the cosmonauts living inside the station, this raised real health concerns, while for scientists thinking about long-duration space missions in the future, it raised a different one. If microorganisms can change this quickly in space, what else might change given enough time and enough distance from Earth? The Vela incident. On September 22, 1979, an American satellite called Vela picked up something unusual over a remote stretch of ocean between South Africa and Antarctica. It was a double flash of light, extremely bright, and the reason that specific pattern mattered so much is that it had only ever been seen in one context before. It was the signature of a nuclear explosion. Matter of fact, Vela satellites were built for exactly this purpose. During the Cold War, the United States needed a way to monitor whether other countries were secretly testing nuclear weapons. So these satellites were sent up specifically to watch for that kind of flash. By 1979, they had detected 41 confirmed nuclear tests. This was allegedly number 42, except nobody ever officially confirmed it. The location was one of the most isolated stretches of ocean on the planet, which would have made it a reasonable place to test something without being seen. A government panel was put together and eventually concluded the signal was probably caused by something hitting the satellite combined with reflected sunlight. However, other agencies ran their own analyses and reached the opposite conclusion. Underwater listening systems detected acoustic signals from that region around the same time, consistent with an explosion. Reports later emerged that sheep in parts of Australia showed unusual thyroid irregularities in the weeks that followed, which can be associated with radiation exposure. The 1972 Great Daylight Fireball. Most things that fall toward Earth from